We've come to the end of this interesting symposium, and its organizers are asking us to respond to the question, from here to where? It is a very important question and a very difficult one to answer. Before we decide on the journey from here to the future, let us have a brief look at the events that have led us here in the first place. How did we arrive here? The symposium we are concluding today has already a long history behind it. It all started with reading an article, by now a classic, in the periodical Science of 1967 by the American historian Lynn White on the theological roots of the ecological crisis. This article made me aware of the responsibility of Christian theology for the emergence of the ecological crisis, with the exaltation of the human being above the rest of creation, and with its call to have dominion over it on the basis of a passage in the book of Genesis containing God's order to Adam and Eve after their creation to subdue the earth. And although this article concentrated mainly on the Western Church, self-criticism of the East appeared to be inevitable. And the question immediately arose: can the Orthodox Church remain indifferent towards the ecological problem? Is Orthodox theology responsible too for the problem that seems to threaten this God's creation? And how can it contribute to its solution? Following this, a proposal was submitted to the Ecumenical Patriarch Demetrius of blessed memory in 1989 to take initiatives for the protection of the environment. The Patriarch and the Holy Synod of the Ecumenical Throne approved the suggestion, and this led to the decision to issue a patriarchal message in 1989 to all people of goodwill to abstain from any activity that would damage the natural environment. In the same message, the 1st of September of each year was to be devoted to the prayers for the protection of the environment. 2 years later, Patriarch Demetrius died, and his successor to the throne, the present Ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomew, not only continued but actually intensified the ecological activities of the Patriarchate with a series of international symposia and other means that gave him rightly the title of the Green Patriarch. The present symposium is the latest of these activities, which it is hoped will continue with God's grace in the future. This somewhat long history of the ecological activities of the Ecumenical Patriarchate has taught us many lessons. We can list only the most important ones. 1. The Church itself has to review some of its theological and pastoral traditions in accordance with the patristic spirit, which has been obscured in modern times, owing mainly to the influence from the West. Thus, A, the importance of the human body as the link between humanity and the rest of nature must be stressed. The human being does not have a body, it is a body. This makes it part of creation and not a species above it. B, the human being is not a proprietor or even, as is often thought, a steward of creation, but a priest of it, called to cultivate and refer it to its creator as his own of his own, as the Orthodox Eucharistic liturgy constantly reminds us. C, the human being cannot treat nature as resources, turning it into a thing, but must develop an attitude of love and respect towards the laws that govern its constitution. Any disturbance and upsetting of the laws of nature affects immediately the human being itself. D. The concept of sin must be enlarged to include also the sin against the natural environment, in whatever form this might take. This is actually a revolution in the history of the Church, because so far, and perhaps still to a great extent, no priest would tell the faithful that they have committed a sin and they have to repent because they have polluted the environment. This is totally outside the agenda of confession of sins. And so it has to be introduced, and this is something that came out of these symposia.
Wow.
These and other lessons emerged from a close dialogue between theology and science. All the ecological symposia of the Patriarchate so far have involved this dialogue. Distinguished scientists challenged the religious leaders and were equally challenged by them. Thus, science has taught theology to take seriously the organic relation of humanity with the animal world. Famous theory of theory action, it's accepted now by everybody, of evolution, to which the Church has very often reacted negatively, has very important implications for ecology. On the other hand, theology has challenged science to abandon its analytical method, which fragments and subdues and uses nature, and to develop a more holistic approach to its methodology. From our experience in these encounters, it emerged that religion and science do not perform a complementary role, the one representing rationality and the other spirituality, as it is usually thought. But they interpenetrate into each other as they both deal with the same object, humanity's relation to nature. These are but a few of the benefits that resulted from the dialogue so far between religion and science, all of them having to do with humanity's relation to nature. There is still a great deal to result from this dialogue, as the present symposium, with its richness and the presentations of its presentation and discussions, has revealed to us. Three main areas have been covered in this symposium by keynote presentations, respondents, and discussions. It's very difficult to summarize them, and it's not necessary to do so. One of these areas has to do with biodiversity and conservation, which highlighted the need to protect animal species from extinction. Yet, as Dr. Goodall pointed out, always caring at the same time for the needs of human beings, a balance not always easy to maintain, because the human being is so greedy that it never knows when its real needs stop and its greed begins. The other areas concerned energy and climate change. The keynote speaker, Mr. McGibbon, warned us about the seriousness of the climatic situation and the danger of the destruction of the planet for the purpose of making money. Finally, the third area concerned economy and innovation, with interesting suggestions and experiments in the food production and discussion of the interconnectedness of the financial, employment, and environmental crisis facing the world today, considering the fact that the world financial system has a global dimension today, which calls for competent world leadership. Now, the richness of a symposium like this cannot be summed up and presented in its fullness. Fortunately, all the papers and the interventions are available on the website. We can only express our reserved satisfaction and appreciation for what this symposium has contributed to the ecological initiatives of the Ecumenical Patriarchate, and to thank you all for that. And now, from here to where? Well, the easy answer is, of course, to the next symposium. I'm sure we all hope there will be one, God willing. The difficult answer, however, is how our suggestions can be implemented and how the ecological situation can improve with the help of a fruitful cooperation between religion and science. Let me attempt to offer some personal thoughts on this question. The first obvious thing that must follow without delay is a program of education of the clergy in the first place, and also at public schools of all degrees. Ecology must permeate all our sermons, our Sunday schools, our theological and scientific literature, etc., as much as possible. We're being unpardonably complacent about that. The most difficult thing, however, will be how to bring the ecological concern into our culture. I have been stressing this point for years now. We need an ecological ethos, not an ecological ethic. An ethic is a matter of principles that can be taught at school or even put into the form of law. An ethos is a matter of attitudes one takes as a result of habits acquired through one's incorporation into a community already from the time of one's birth and growth in the family and in society. Such habits require a symbolic language of a community. They are not taught by appeal to rationality, but are acquired by tradition. Now the problem is that society, at least in the West, has lost to a large extent the character of community. and is no longer operating with symbols provided normally in the past by religion. Secularization has put all its efforts in the realm of rationality, and so has the Church too, particularly since the Enlightenment. Thus, we have to wait until a child grows enough to conceive rational principles in order to educate it ecologically. This may prove to be too late, especially in the case of a cultural environment which is not congenial to ecological ethos. Such a cultural environment, hostile to ecology, is the one created today by technology, particularly in its computer form. This kind of technology debodies and dematerializes culture by encouraging and developing means of communication between human beings that bypass or surpass the human body, through which the human being experiences its interdependence with nature. People now relate to one another without the mediation of the body or of the spatio-temporal conditions provided by the natural environment. The natural environment is thus made redundant by technology. Technology does not pollute nature. It may even clean it. It simply renders it useless. You don't have to touch the body of someone in order to relate with him or her. It suffices to use the internet, to be online in order to be in touch. In saying these things, I am fully aware that I shall be met with strong objections on two counts. There are those who worship computer technology so much that they are totally blind to its ecological consequences. With such people, there seems to be no ground for agreement whatsoever, no ground for discussion. There is another objection, however, that must be taken seriously. Technology has established itself so deeply and strongly in our culture that it would be totally unrealistic to reject it in order to save the environment. In this case, the only option before us is to minimize its use as much as possible. I have in mind the example of the monastery of the Odochos Pigi at Chania in Crete. We heard something from the representatives of this monastery who are among us, which is building a church to be consecrated by His Own Holiness in September by using only the human hand and fully respecting nature. This and only this can be called ecological ethos in the true sense of the term. The rest are compromises out of necessity and have to be admitted as such. There seem to be, to me, two kinds of ecology. The one that I would call radical ecology, and the other one that could be called managerial ecology. Radical ecology would use the minimum of technology or none of it, and would be prepared to sacrifice economy or reduce the living standards, thus advocating what we may call ecological asceticism. The other kind of ecology, the managerial one, would not only avoid renouncing technology, but would use it by putting it to the service of a better environment. This kind of ecology would not only keep economy, but even use the environment to enhance it. with the help of technological innovation. Where does religion belong? If it is to be true to its nature, religion cannot but belong to what I have called radical ontology. This is particularly true about the Orthodox Church, with its strong Eucharistic and ascetical tradition. Science, on the other hand, nowadays, and I underline nowadays, tends towards the managerial type of ecology, as it is more and more absorbed by technology. Our conference has been dominated, you all know that, by managerial ecology, as the element of religion has been absent from it. This highlighted the need for a real dialogue between the two kinds of ecology, an exciting prospect for the future. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished participants of the symposium, the journey from here to the future is not going to be an easy one. The ecological crisis will persist, for it is in fact a cultural crisis. So long as we remain unwilling to challenge fundamental principles of our culture with the help of religious faith, the ecological problem will remain with us. But we must persist. We have no choice but follow the journey, even if we do not know what its final destination will be. In the words of Gaddafi, the great Greek poet, it is the journey to Ithaca, not Ithaca itself, that matters in the end. We are grateful to God and to His Holiness, as well as to the organizers of this symposium and to all of you who participated in it, for what we have done in these days here, for this journey to this beautiful island of hope, which is called Halki. And we promise to continue the journey for the sake of this beautiful world that God has granted us and entrusted in our hands to keep and cultivate it. Thank you.